All of my clients are really interested in really being able to speak up in the moment. What happens for them is that they're not really sure what the fuck to say in those moments, and they might not be clear around when those moments arise so they can even choose to speak up and not stay silent. If that's to you too, I want you to stay tuned because I'm going to share two turning points, one experience where I had to call someone out and one experience when I had to call someone in. Um, so that when you have some of these struggles, you have a little bit of more information, some strategies, a little bit of awareness around what you can do differently. But before we get into that, my name is Petra Vega. I am an anti-oppressive leadership coach, and I help marginalized nonprofit leaders speak up in crucial moments in meetings, even when self-doubt may be getting in the way. I'm going to share a variety of strategies and tactics during this video so that you can be able to speak up in the moment. But I also want to encourage you to grab my Nonprofit Disruptive Survival Toolkit. Here, I include 5 tips for you to be able to speak up in meetings without all the second guessing so that you can finally get your liberatory ideas heard and implemented. Again, I highly suggest that you get this resource. You can sit with it, process it, feel free to ask me questions about it. Let's first start out with the call out scenario. I think these are super difficult for those of us who want to be like values aligned, who are in the process of reclaiming our voices, to be able to see like, oh, there's something not quite right here. What can I do about that? So I want to share, there was a moment in one of my, I think this was 2 jobs ago, during a morning meeting. And in this morning meeting, we had the executive director, myself, I was a program manager there. We had our program director. We had other program operations and development staff also there. Most of that portion, that region of the organization, because it was a national organization, most of that region was people of color. We had 2 white women on staff. That is important for the story that I'm going to tell. So one of the things that we were asked to do during these morning meetings is that we all took turns around sharing a particular check-in question, right? This was at the height of 2020. And one of the development staff people was responsible for this day's check-in. And the check-in was hella problematic. I'm trying to think about what the specific question was, but I do remember that it included something that was like, would you rather be in prison for a year or something else? And again, if you paid attention to what was happening in 2020, it was when the public discourse around policing and abolition was really, really hot. And so I thought this question was rather inappropriate and really absent-minded, given that the organization really had a focus on equity and racial justice at the time. And I didn't like that. Okay. And so based on what I saw was that the rest of the team was also like, oh, this is not quite right. I don't really like this question. They also seemed, based on their faces, they also thought that it was inappropriate. And so here I was thinking, I was like, okay, who's going to say something to this person, you know? And so I want to kind of go through and kind of bring the context of what is happening, right? This might be something you're already aware of, or this is a practice you can start implementing when you're trying to figure out what you want to do during these moments. So the external risk that I saw, right? Here, I was like, okay, if I were to say something, will I be overstepping? Here I am in a meeting with people who are in executive leadership roles, who are my supervisor, the program director was in this meeting. I was really worried about overstepping, right? And I was like, okay, what if I say something and then all these other people with more positional power than me are like, well, who the fuck do you think you are, Petra? So that was something I was thinking about at this time. The other external risk that I saw was like, okay, will I be seen as offensive and mean, right? If I were to tell this person that like, I wasn't really fucking with that question, what will people take my intention of us trying to be aligned around our equitable and racial justice values? Will they take it as like, oh, she's doing too much right now, you know? So those are some of the external things that I had seen is like, oh, that there's a potential for that if I were to speak up in this moment. Internally, this is what I want you to think about the external risks, and I want you to think about the internal conflicts, right? Like that's really the shit that is the reason that you're watching this video, right? You have a desire around how you want to show up in the external, in the public arena, but there's this conflict you have internally. For me, I'm someone that really identifies as being someone who speaks truth to power. And so I know that if I see something problematic or something or like an oppressive thought or behavior, I really feel like it is my place to say something and kind of right those wrongs. And so, but that was my internal conflict. And I was like, but I'm saying I'm this kind of person, and this kind of person would say something about this fucked up question. Am I not the person that I say I am? Eek, you know? And that's oftentimes also what my clients are kind of struggling with too, that they're like, okay, this is someone that I'm saying that I am, but you couldn't see that from how I actually move about the world. And then our work together is about bringing that closer to integrity and alignment. So here's what I did, right? And so I noticed I had let everyone in the meeting answer this check-in question. And everyone was like, oh, I don't really know about this, but I guess I would do blah, blah, blah. Like people were also not sure how to speak up, which also makes speaking up hard. And I give tips around how you can formulate your speaking up in a way that is more likely to get heard. Again, in that nonprofit disruptor survival toolkit. So again, grab that. And so what I noticed, right, was that nobody was saying anything. And I was really surprised by that, right? That I was like, wow, these are people who have been in the nonprofit game for a decade, 2 decades, and don't know how to handle a moment like this or cannot rise to the occasion. I was baffled by that. Again, given that I think our ideas about people in leadership, particularly if they're at the highest channels of leadership, is that they are supposed to hold the standard of what is okay in the organization. But that was not the case, right? And I honestly, that felt very cowardice to me, you know, and I was like, y'all are not the people that I thought you were, right? And I also felt really frustrated, right? Because even though most of us at the region were people of color, the person who had said this was a white woman in development, so it was a little bit far removed from a program where I think we kind of get more into these anti-oppressive ideas. I was really irritated by being like the only in that region, the only like Black, Puerto Rican, queer, autistic. At the time I didn't know, but I knew that I had some level of disability or mental illness, or mental health difference rather. But also I do have mental illnesses. And I was just like, damn, why is it always that the multiple marginalized people always have to say some shit? And so there was some frustration there. Again, I just want to name all of the feelings that may come inside of your decision to ultimately speak up. But again, I am so committed to being someone who speaks truth to power in the face of anyone that really got me over the hump, right? And so ultimately I said something, and I think something to the effect of like, that the check-in was not appropriate and that I wouldn't be engaging with it, you know? And I left it at that. And, you know, even though, you know, I knew it was the right thing to do to say something to kind of put this person on notice around like, that's not cool. You really need to think about your intention around things, your impact around things. I did feel bad, right? That I was like, damn, because I saw this person had feelings about it, right? Like we all know about like white guilt. And so some of that was showing up, white tears, some of that was showing up. She had gone off screen a few times. We know that those things happen, right? But offline, everyone direct messaged me and was like, thank you so much for saying something. I didn't know how to say anything. That was so awkward, but like, we so appreciate you for saying something, which is so interesting, right? And so I like, you know, I received the big ups, the compliments around like, oh, you just did a hard thing that was necessary, but also I still felt all of my feelings. And I was like, yeah, but it shouldn't have been me, right? And I made sure at this point at the organization, I had built strong enough relationships so I could say some shit like this and nobody would be like, who the fuck do you think you are? I had told folks that I was like, you know, I appreciate it. I really would like this to be a team effort next time and not that it's just me, someone who's like, because anti-oppression is my special interest and I'm so a little bit more fluent around addressing these things in the moment. And I let the team know that I was like, okay, look, I said something which needed to happen. Someone needs to go check on her, right? Because what I don't want to happen to her or really anyone that is called out in that kind of way, I don't want her to develop the understanding that's like, oh, I'm a bad person. You know, I've done a bad thing. I'm a bad person. It's like, nah, we all have problematic thoughts, but no one is you can't unlearn them unless someone tells you about it, right? Because if not, they're just like living in your head. And it's not until you interact with someone else in the world, they're like, oh, that might be a little bit fucked up. And so I'm grateful that the other white woman at the organization who was a coworker at the time, but now she's one of my best friends, she was like, yeah, I'll go check on her, right? And so even when we think about, okay, what does it mean to speak up in the moment? Also thinking about like, what are the relationships that we're building? Who are the allies of these organizations? And so even if it is that you are the one that has to pop the bubble, you know, of the oppressive bubble, you also aren't doing the labor around like, okay, is this person okay? Like, what's the meaning they're making from it? I want to say that me and this person had a conversation afterwards at the end of the day, after she had conversations with my coworker. It was fine, right? It is like an awkward, difficult, not fun thing, but it was fine, right? Like I learned something, that person learned something, hopefully. And so here's the lesson that I want to offer to you, right? Just because people have more power than you doesn't mean that they're more qualified or more values driven than you are, right? I already told you that I had an executive director, a program director. These are the two people in leadership positions above me that didn't do shit. They didn't say nothing, right? Who, in comparison, have been in the game 10 plus years longer than me, right? But because I've been building the courage to speak up in the moment, to have these kind of conversations, I was able to see the moment and to address it where that was not the work that they were doing, right? And so I don't want you to underestimate the power that you have just because you're not in these like more these positions of more power, right? I think that's bullshit, and I don't want you to believe that. And so again, this is really about like, don't outsource your power, right? That you don't know what your perspective, what is the impact of your perspective, and you don't know how that can like shift or set the stage for something different, right? Because that moment we then began to recall around like, oh yeah, we really need to do better about this, right? Like it can't just be Petra. But if I would have never said something, we would have never even had that experience, that shared experience of being like, we're not doing our work in a really rigorous way, but we say that we are, there's a missed opportunity. I want to hear from you, right? Like if you were in this moment, if you've had moments like this where someone has said something, you're like, eek, I feel like, someone should say something. Have you spoke up in these moments, right? Or are you someone who would stay quiet? And it's okay. Whatever response you are, it's just around you taking, what's it called? Like stock over where you are, right? So that is my call out example. And again, I would love to hear, would you speak up in this moment? Have you spoken up, or are you someone that's like, I don't really know what to say. I kind of just choose silence. I'd love to hear what your experience has been. Okay. For the Colin scenario, at the same organization, we had I told you that it was this national organization. We would often have cross-regional staff meetings. And so oftentimes I would meet with the other program managers in the other regions. And at this point during this situation, I had built I would say, moderately close relationships with these people. During this meeting, we were all expected to report out like, okay, what's the status of the activities? There's certain things that we each had to get done. And we would check in as a region to be like, okay, what's going well, what's not going well. Up until this point, all of those meetings have felt very like bland and corporate and fake, very honestly, right? Everyone was like, everything's going fine. Meanwhile, I knew one-on-one because I spoke to these people, things were very not fine, and it was always so peculiar and strange to me around being that I'm like, okay, you can tell me, you can keep it 100, you can keep it funky with me, but why are we lying to each other in the midst of these meetings? Like, what is it about that? And so here we go, right? This is another meeting where one by one, everybody's like, oh yeah, everything's fine, things are moving, everything's on time, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, y'all is lying out here. You're just lying in these internet streets, because we honestly none of us had our shit together, to varying degrees. We did not have it together. And so I was like, okay, again, here's a moment. What can I do about that? I could fall in line with how people are responding, or I could do something different. And so for me, I was like, okay, I could either lie and save face in front of my colleagues, or I could tell the truth I could be honest about the progress that I've made. And so again, I want us to come back to the external risks, right? Like, what does it play here if I were to speak up and say actually what I wanted to say? Here's what some of the external risks are. I know that no one, me included, wants to look incompetent in front of their colleagues. So even though one-to-one, we were all cool, very jokey, very casual, very honest, very transparent, I knew there was something about the group think of it that made us want to fall in line, made us want to feel like we had to put up all of these professional masks again, right? And if you are neurodivergent, you know how exhausting that shit is, right? And so I was like, okay, that's what's at risk here, is that maybe people will respect me less. Maybe people will be like, oh, Petra doesn't have her shit together. Maybe people, just generally think less of me. That is what could be possible if I were to speak up and say actually what I wanted to say. Internally, I had this tension around like, okay, do I care more about being authentic and honest and true about my experience and where I'm at? Or do I care more about how I'm being perceived, right? About and that do I care more about being someone who's perceived as capable, right? Is that uh, conception around other people's thinking of me, is that so important? And for me, I have spent so many years like reclaiming my authenticity, unmasking, and I'm really interested in being more me than I was yesterday. And so this felt like an opportunity to lean into that. And if you work with me, you know that all of the risks that I invite people to engage in, and I call them risks because it is risky to do something different, right? And I want to be very honest about that because a lot of us stay silent because it's safe, and that's really real. And the folks that I really work with are interested to unravel that internal conflict where I'm like, okay, I know that I've associated silence with safety, but I actually really want to be authentic. I want to be outspoken. I want my opinions to be heard, and I want them to mean something at the organization that I'm at. And so the work that I do is really about like, okay, let's gather some data. Let's try some shit, right? And depending on where they are in their tolerance for ambiguity and discomfort, some of it might be a big risk, some of it might be a little risk. But we want to gather data around like, okay, there's a lot of fear that we have. Is this fear true? Is it valid? You know, do we have evidence of it? And so here I was again with this internal conflict. I knew that there was a risk of being seen as someone who like didn't have it together, and I'd be seen as unprofessional, blah, 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 blah. Here's what I did, right? So at this time, at this organization, I was really beginning to apply my approach, or rather the frameworks around emergent strategy into my leadership approach. And there is an emergent strategy principle that says, there's a conversation in the room that only these people at this moment can have. Find it. I knew that there was a fucking agenda. I'm well aware, but I was like, this is so not what we need to be talking about right now. I am so curious as to why we're not being for real with each other. And that's the conversation I want us to have. And I think that's an opportunity here. So I leaned into it. And that was the thing that guided me to then behave in this way. So I called in my colleagues and I said, why are we lying about the progress that we so-called are making? Well, we know damn well to each other, we are being very honest and transparent around how we don't have shit together. You know, the deliverables are not getting done at the time that we expected. They will get done because we are, you know, competent and qualified people, but they are not getting done at the rate that we had thought. And that's okay. That's different. But I had to call them in to be like, why are we being funky? Why are we being fake to each other? We said we didn't want to do that. We wanted to try something different in these relationships, but why are we doing that in these meetings? And my colleagues really appreciated me for that, for holding all of us accountable to the things that we said we wanted to do with each other. We saw the ways in which all of these other meetings, other people were very fake and bland and just white-coated professionalism, and we said we didn't want to do that with each other. We wanted to lean into to transparency and vulnerability and radical honesty, but here we were not, right? And so, right, so my colleagues appreciated for holding us accountable. We went back and we were like, actually, when I said that this thing was moving, it's actually not moving. This is what happened, right? So then people were like, actually, first draft, that's not everything that is true. Let me add a little bit more. And so now with that, and I just want to highlight what that drastically changed our relationships, right? It meant that our meetings then could actually deal with what is actually being with the truth of what is, instead of us like dealing with the projections or the would be nices of whatever. Like we couldn't actually help and support one another, even though it was the intention of the meeting to troubleshoot. Like, and if we're gonna troubleshoot, we need to have problems. But if people are so afraid to name problems, we can never be actually supportive and collaborative with each other. And so that moment, that little just adjustment shift drastically changed our meetings. It drastically deepened our relationship. Even now, I haven't been at this organization for like 4 to 5 years, and I still have those colleagues be like, wow, that was really a fucking moment. That lives in the canon of, oof, what does it mean to be like courageous and vulnerable and honest and, you know, speaking up authentically? What does that look like? And so here's the lesson that I want to offer to you, right? Is that even with the best of intentions, right? Because I already told you that we had conversations about how we wanted to be with each other. And so we did that work in order for us to get ready to then, practice to be with each other in a different way. Even with the best of intentions, people can still fall back on old habits, right? In an effort to protect themselves, right? And this happens through masking, right? Playing up and being someone that you actually aren't. It's through code switching. It's through embodying and perpetuating these whitewashed versions of professionalism. And at the same time, we have an opportunity to disrupt that behavior, to disrupt those beliefs, right? If we can see the opportunity. And so I want to hear from you. Would you have lied in order to save face? Or would you have told the truth and possibly be judged by that? Where are you at? And it might be that, like, there's you can remember early on in your nonprofit career that you were someone that really would stay quiet in that moment and not try to rock the boat, quote unquote. But maybe now you're like, oh, I feel like I'm a little bit more in the headspace of that, but I'm not really sure how to move towards it. So I'd love to hear that in the chat. Again, I want to pop here. The Nonprofit Disruptor Survival Toolkit, where I share, again, 5 tips to help you speak up in these meetings, right? Both of these things happen in a meeting. There was opportunity for second guessing, but I want to help you get your liberatory ideas heard and implemented. So I really suggest that you grab that free resource.